excited to be here with you today. I'm just going to get right into it, start talking to you about the stuff I'm planning to talk to you about. Then we're going to bring my friend and colleague Sarah Milstein out to talk about trust on remote teams. I'm going to start this through a personal lens because, for better or worse, that is generally the lens through which I am inclined to start things. Pardon me while I find some slides. I don't know if anybody else is finding themselves spending a lot of time making noises like that to themselves on the internet. Hi, everybody. So as Mathilde mentioned, I'm a product coach and consultant. I've been rewatching The Simpsons with my wife, so I'm feeling very like Troy McClure these days. You may remember me from such books as Product Management in Practice and Agile for Everybody, and such conferences as Jam London. Speaking of such conferences as Jam London, in February of this year, I was ready for a year of travel. I was psyched up for a year on the road to explore and be in crowded rooms full of breathing people. And I was really excited for it. I said, you know what? This is going to be my year. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to just live life to the fullest. And sure, I have this pattern where I travel and work until I burn out and get sick and exhausted, and then I go somewhere to recharge, and then I come back and work until I'm sick and exhausted and tired. But I'm ready for it. It's the life I choose. I choose my choice. By early March of this year, it was clear both personally and globally that this was maybe not what the year was going to look like, but I was staying the course. I was ready for it. I said, sure, I feel extra exhausted even just from traveling a little bit, and there's this pandemic thing going on, but I don't think it's going to change anything. I think this is still going to be a year of travel and fun and relative normalcy. I remember very clearly when we got back from New York at the end of February, pulling my wife aside and saying, you know, I think we're just going to have to wash our hands a little bit more, but this year's probably going to be fine, pretty normal. This slide kind of speaks for itself. I think we've all probably had our moments of existential terror in the last couple of months. For those of us who, like myself, have an anxiety disorder, this might have been particularly pronounced. But human beings are remarkably capable of adjusting to pretty stressful things. And by late March of 2020, I was starting to try to find a path to a new normal. What's the upside here? What can I do to make the most of this time? I don't know how many of you out there are Twilight Zone fans, but for those of you who are, both this image and the name of this talk come from an episode called Time Enough at Last, in which a bookish gentleman finds himself the sole survivor of a hydrogen bomb blast and realizes that he finally has time to read all the books he's ever wanted to read in the whole world. And for me in late March, I was starting to look at the world a little bit like this myself. I was saying, hey, I can manage my own time more effectively since I don't need to travel. Getting on an airplane every 2 weeks is disruptive. It's exhausting. Also, people aren't interrupting me in the same way anymore. I mean, I've worked from home primarily since 2015, but I also do a lot of on-site work. I do a lot of travel, and there's something to be said for the fact that I can now be the architect of my own time. But for those of you who are Twilight Zone fans, you may also know that things do not work out so well for our hero. After having this moment of optimism and hope, he trips and breaks his glasses and says, it's not fair, it's not fair. This pretty accurately tracks with my experience of the last couple of months, which is to say, at a certain point, after reading all those tweets about how Shakespeare wrote the Declaration of Independence in quarantine and other various things that don't really make any sense, I found myself really struggling to do even basic things. And the reason for that is not so complicated. Erica Joy wrote this on March 16th. What we are experiencing now is not normal remote working. We are in a pandemic. People are struggling. Everyone is distracted at some level. Now, this obviously makes sense, right? This is a different quality of time that we are in right now. And as somebody who's worked remotely for a long time, the question I've been asking myself is, what is the biggest difference? Day to day, what is the experiential, textural difference that most characterizes this time versus the before time? And there's one thing I keep coming back to, both when I think about this myself and in the coaching conversations I have with product managers and product leaders. In the before times, we could compartmentalize. Because we had a little bit of extra bandwidth, we felt more emotionally stable perhaps, we had more control over our surroundings. We could draw some boundaries, even if we worked from home, between our home self and our work self. So again, for folks like myself who have an anxiety disorder, sometimes during that home self, there's panic and terror, there's anxiety, there's vibration, there's exhaustion, right? After work, I'm just exhausted. I'm going to sit there and stare off into space. There's venting, there's complaining about the people I work with. This person said this, I don't know what it means. Do they hate me? Are they mad at me? What's going on? And there is, of course, farting. When we had this bandwidth to compartmentalize, I certainly experienced this, and I know a lot of product managers and leaders experience this as well. You could kind of steel yourself, prepare to be that best version of yourself. You could muster confidence, energy, navigate politics, and suppress farts during your working time. You could take that messy home self energy and channel it into a better version of yourself that you present to your colleagues. It's really hard to do that now. The things that we were able to in the past seemingly keep relatively confined to our home selves now show through in our work selves in ways that are, I think, at times surprising even to us as individuals. And part of what that means is that the coping mechanisms we had when we could compartmentalize in that way are now failing us spectacularly. I've become very acutely aware of the extent to which my coping mechanism in the past was to burn out and then run away. Even when I was planning for my fun year of work and travel, this was essentially what I was planning for. I would work and work and work until I was too exhausted to function, and I'd go away for the weekend or a week if I was really lucky, and then come back ready to burn out all over again. And at first, I felt like, wow, those weekends and weeks away were really my coping mechanism. That's how I dealt with the stress of work. But in the harsh light of the pandemic, what I've come to realize is that burning out was actually my coping mechanism. For me, the deep, dark fear underlying a lot of these challenges is the fear that if I'm not always doing a great job, impressing everybody, bringing my best self to everything that is public-facing and work-adjacent, then everyone's going to hate me. They're going to think I'm bad, that I'm a fraud, that I'm a jerk, that I'm stupid. The burning out was my way of dealing with that fear. Working until I had nothing left to give. Trying so hard that nobody could be disappointed in me or feel that I hadn't worked hard enough. That was actually the coping mechanism. The running away was just what I did in order to recharge for my next coping mechanism. And the reality is, you can't power through a moment like this when you're running on very, very little power. And just managing existence in these times leaves us with very, very little power. It's not even so much that I can't run away, it's that I no longer have the energy to burn myself out the way I once did. The other thing that's becoming acutely aware to a lot of the product managers and product leaders I work with is that you cannot hold yourself to an unreasonable standard when your whole team is struggling. Everybody is trying to figure out what it means to work hard enough, what it means to do a good job in this moment. And if you say, oh yeah, my team can take time off, they can do whatever they need, they can take care of themselves, but I am going to work through this no matter what, your team is going to look at you and say, maybe I'm not doing enough. Maybe I need to work harder. Maybe I can't take care of myself. Maybe I should just be pushing myself and powering through. The one theme I keep coming back to in my coaching conversations with product leaders is that the standard you set for yourself is the standard you set for your team. If you tell yourself, I'm going to prioritize self-care, I'm going to be public about when I get stressed out and I need to take a step away, your team will think they can do that too. If you say, I'm just going to keep working, I'm going to show how hard I'm working and I'm doing a good job, your team will start to expect that of themselves. Here's the thing. This was always true. This is not unique to this challenging moment. For those of you who overworked yourselves, who tried to do the team challenge by yourself, who said, I'm going to take on all this work and show my team how hard I'm working, this was harmful to your team in the before times as well. The thing is, you just couldn't see it because your colleagues were venting about it when they went back home. When we all had more bandwidth to compartmentalize, when you couldn't see that stress and confusion right there on the surface of what your colleagues are going through, when you were the product martyr who worked yourself into the ground, your team probably was processing that when they were not at the office. But now we are seeing our full messy selves reflected back in the reactions of others. And it is at times very weird and a little bit scary. We're seeing that messy mix of what we've thought of as our work selves and what we've thought of as our home selves jumbled together. And we're learning that we were maybe never as good at compartmentalizing as we thought we were. This is actually a gift. This particular aspect of this, I'm so reluctant to say that anything in this upsetting and terribly sad moment is an opportunity or a gift. But the gift that I have found in this is that I can no longer pretend that I can be great at my job without working on myself. I can no longer pretend that running myself into the ground, running myself ragged, makes me a better coach, a better consultant, a better product leader. And for me, this is not a new revelation. In 2018, I moved from New York City to the desert of New Mexico in the hopes of getting a better handle on my anxiety and finally doing some of that work on myself that I was no longer able to put off, because I could sense that these challenges I faced, my anxiety, my fear, my intrinsic questions about my own self-worth, were showing through in other parts of my life in a way that was no longer sustainable. And as I went through this, there were a couple of lessons I learned and things I did that I want to leave you with as prompts for you to think about as you adjust to this for yourselves and for your teams. Number one, keep a lookout for communication blind spots. Communication blind spots are situations where what you think you're saying is not what you're actually saying. And these are those situations where that disconnect between what we think of as our home selves and our work selves are often most immediately material. I'll tell you my favorite example of this. Last year, I sent an email to my business partners that I thought said, I'm burning out. I'm exhausted. I can't take on any more meetings. I can't do any more early morning meetings. I'm about to burn out. I'm right on the cusp. Help me. Please respect my time. An hour later, I got a call from one of my business partners asking if I could join a call at 6 a.m. the next day. And I got so mad. I said, how could you do this to me? I finally did the thing I've been afraid to do, where I told you about the challenges I'm having and my capacity issues. And here you go, you come back and just make me do all this stuff. I hate it. It's not fair. My business partner said, that's not the email you sent. Go back and read the email you actually sent. The email I had actually sent was less, help me, I am drowning, and more, dear sir or madam, if it is not too much of an inconvenience for you, at your soonest availability, I would forthwith like to discuss the topic of prioritization and how we might to better perform as a team, prioritizing our collective and individual energies. Good day, sir or madam. Thank you very much. I realized that for me, actually asking for what I need, being clear about my own boundaries, asking for time, saying I've hit my limit is a huge communication blind spot. It is where I need to do a second and third read on any communication I send to my team to make sure that I'm actually saying what I actually mean. In the wake of this realization, my wife, who is an artist, painted these friendly reminders that sit behind my desk. They're right there. One that says communicate your energy and capacity, and one that says your team has your back, but trust their good intentions. I have on my morning checklist to spend a moment with both of these posters every morning. And it's been really helpful for me to remind myself that when I am afraid to tell my team what I need, I'm actually thinking less of them. If I assume that my team is going to be mad at me for letting a deadline slip because I'm exhausted, or for asking for more time, or saying I need to establish this boundary, if I assume they're going to take that badly and act accordingly, I'm actually underestimating them. I'm not giving them a chance to be who I know they are. And that's not fair to them, let alone to me. A few other things I've been trying to keep myself honest about in this time. I've been trying to be better about delegating. Again, in this moment when we are all trying to step up and do what we need to for our teams, there is this rush to take on work, to say, I'll do it. Don't worry, team. I got it. Take care of yourselves. I've got this. But it's important now more than ever, and this is always something I've struggled with. If you are the type of product manager or product leader who did the group assignment by yourself in school, I may be speaking to you right now. It is more important than ever that you delegate meaningful things to your colleagues, that you make sure that they stay involved in important strategic conversations, that you let them participate in a way that feels meaningful, because that'll help them navigate this time as well. This is not the time to take everything on for yourself. Retrospect. I'm such a huge believer in retrospectives. I've seen them transform teams. I've run retrospectives with leadership teams who've never run retrospectives before and seen everything change in terms of how they manage their activities. I'm such a huge believer in retrospectives. Things are changing more quickly than they ever have before in this moment. Keep running your retrospectives. Start running retrospectives. Retrospect, now more than ever. And finally, again, this is the crummy, challenging opportunity we have. Do the difficult ongoing work of addressing the underlying issues that you are seeing reflected back in yourself. Now is the time to work on yourself, because now is the time when, for better or worse, you have no choice but to bring your entire self to everything you do. And again, that's not just because our children and pets are showing up on our Zoom calls. It's because we do not have the cognitive and emotional bandwidth to compartmentalize in the way we once did. There's a reason that when you're on a plane, remember planes? You are told to put your mask on first before you help others. And the last piece of advice I will leave you with, as I struggle with this myself every single day, is to be kind to yourself when your mask falls off and you need to take a moment to put it back on. This is ongoing work. This isn't the moment when you solve this forever. This is the moment when you become more aware of these things and you set yourself on a lifelong journey to doing the difficult emotional work of getting yourself in a better place. So that's it for me. I think David's going to join and ask a few questions, and then we're going to bring Sarah on for our fireside chat. Let me stop sharing my screen, for I have shared what I have to share. Hello.
How are you doing? That was great. I love it.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic in sunny London. I'll give you an applause. Typically, the crowds would have gone crazy at all the gifts. No, from my side, I guess it's been amazing. This talk, we saw a bit of chat, and there's a lot of truth. It almost feels like you managed to jump in and seen it basically from every product manager's perspective as to what they're wondering. So a couple of questions, I guess, like to your talk just now. You talked a little bit about your daily routine, and we keep hearing that as well. Maybe you can give a little bit of an insight around what are the things that you do that give you energy throughout the day, and what are the things that you try to avoid because they're just simply not, and you want to kind of create that, I guess, separation between feeling good and caring about yourself.
That's a great question. Thank you. You know, it's funny because I've read all the things saying like, get up and take a shower and put on your clothes like you're going to work and have separation. I'm not great at that. Honestly, I wake up at like 6 a.m. most mornings, make coffee. For a while, I was really good about not checking my phone first thing in the morning. I have slipped on that. I'm still good at that in the evening. My phone goes off at 7 p.m. every evening so I can turn my brain off. But I've slipped in the morning in terms of being disconnected from my phone. I usually have calls starting at 7 a.m. and I am in a t-shirt that I slept in and pajama bottoms, just trying to get through those calls. I try to go for a walk outside when I can, but it's been rainy here and I haven't. So I don't know if I'm in a position to give particularly qualified advice around that, but what I will say is that there's no magic trick. There's no one weird trick to follow these steps and you will not grapple with existential dread and anxiety during a pandemic. I think just, again, taking that tool of retrospection and being like, when in the day do I feel good? When in the day do I feel crappy? What can I do to get more of those good moments and maybe change what I'm doing in those bad moments? But again, I've been surprised at how often I will have bad days on days when I do the things I'm supposed to do, and good days on the days when I don't do the things I'm supposed to do, and who knows?
That makes sense. Another question I guess I had was with regards to the relationships with your colleagues. So what happens to all the coffee catch-ups, to the moments when you turn around or turn behind your back and you have a quick question that you want to ask? These days you're like, am I going to schedule a Zoom call? Am I going to Slack someone? Like, do you have any tips for people like how to communicate effectively with their teammates?
Yeah, so my business partners and I have been a distributed team for 5 years now, and we're fully distributed. There have been times when one of my business partners is in Shanghai and another is in Lima, and we're all in different time zones trying to figure things out. One thing we did that was really powerful was we actually made a communications manual. We sat down and we said, how are we going to use different channels for what kinds of things? And what are the expectations around each of those communication channels? So in other words, if I get a WhatsApp, how long do I have to respond to that? If I get an email, how long do I have to respond to that? When we initially wrote the comms manual, we had 3 channels. We had WhatsApp for immediate turnaround or ASAP turnaround, Slack for 24 hours, and email for 72 hours. Once we actually codified that into a comms manual, we got rid of Slack because nothing needed 24 hours turnaround. It was always either like, hey, can you get back to me quickly? Or, hey, here's something that will require your attention at a specific time. So I think for remote teams, having an explicit operating agreement around communication channels is really important. And it's even more important now because part of that was that we decided to use Marco Polo to just give each other like friendly check-ins, and that's been really valuable for us. So I think, yeah, just having a conversation about communication as directly and explicitly as possible is 100% an important thing to do.
Amazing. Cool. I think we maybe have like 1 or 2 more minutes. If there's any questions from the audience, feel free to send maybe one in the chat. I'll just give an opportunity for anybody else to have a question. Cool. Maybe that's it.
All right.
We can move on. Yeah. Great.
Thanks so much. Thanks everybody.
Thanks so much as well.